We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I am Rachel Druckenmiller, the host of the Unmute Yourself live show. I'm so excited to see so many names in the chat today. So welcome to Buddy from Dallas. We've got, hey, Lenny. Leonard Young is one of the most supportive people on the planet from Boston. Shout out to the Northeast. Brian's here. Brian Pulliam. It's a Druckenmiller Monday. It has been a Druckenmiller month. My husband Bill and I both have birthdays in July, and my husband's birthday weekend was this past weekend, and we had the best time. We love to surprise each other. We've been together for 17 years, and one of the things that we have so much fun doing is for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, is we plan special days for the other person that are full of surprises. And so I got to surprise Bill with lots of things all weekend, like a golf outing at a indoor golf simulator with his friends, and got him some new clubs, and we went to brunch and we saw Oppenheimer. Amazing movie, by the way. Has anyone seen Oppenheimer? It's amazing. Went to dinner at an Italian restaurant in Baltimore. So fun. Oh my gosh, yay, July birthdays. So Brian, is yours the 21st? That's my husband's birthday. That's so funny. Welcome everybody. If you're just joining, let us know you're joining us in the chat. Christopher Littlefield, welcome. Good to have you here. I know we connected in North Carolina 2 years ago, I think it was. Maureen, your birthday is this Wednesday. Well, happy birthday. I feel like I just have to do this. So this is for Brian and Maureen. Y'all know I love to sing. So I'm going to take a moment. If everyone could just drop a birthday wish to Brian and Maureen in the chat. And oh my gosh, Natalie, you too. All right, time out now. This needs to happen. Before we bring our guest on, before we ask our opening question, this has to happen. So if everyone wants to drop this in the chat, I'm going to do a little bit of a birthday greeting for our birthdays here. All right, so here you go. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to Natalie, Maureen, and Brian. That was Chad Littlefield. Sorry, Chris. There you go. Happy birthday to all the birthday peoples. July is a great month to be born. So are the other months, but I'm biased. July is a really great month to be born. If you're just joining us, welcome. Rebecca, Carla, Toby, Tom. Who have I missed? Let's see. Rich is here from Wisconsin. Toby, I think I said Toby. Sorry about that. Lisa is here. Nathan's here. Good to have all of you. If you haven't already dropped a hello in the chat, feel free to drop it in. And with that, I want to offer an opening question. When we talk about what it is to unmute yourself, if you're new to the show, you got a sense of what that is from the opening intro video. And if you've been with us before, you get reminded of that every time we come together every other week. And one of the things that leads to an unmuted life, I think, is to take moments to pause and to recognize what we appreciate, what we're grateful for, what the moments or blips or glimpses of joy are in our lives. So if you want to take a moment and drop in the chat, what is something that has been a bright spot for you? What has been a bright spot for you in the past, let's say, the past couple of days? It could be the past week if you'd like. I already mentioned mine, which was celebrating my husband's birthday. As I said, seeing Oppenheimer, awesome movie if you haven't yet seen it. Can't wait to see the Barbie movie that's going to come at some point. But I know, right, Brian? You didn't get celebrated in school if your birthday was in the summer. But let's take a moment, drop in the chat. Welcome, Emily Schaefer. Good to have you here. Drop in the chat, what is something that's been a bright spot for you? Something that has been something that's a glimmer of hope, a source of joy, something that filled you up, no matter how small. It could be you saw a really pretty bird outside your window today, or you had a really delicious cup of coffee. It could be something very simple. So drop in the chat, what is something that is a bright spot for you? It's a helpful practice for us to engage in at the start of the week. And I'll say another bright spot for me as these are coming in was seeing a comment this morning. I'll be honest, I was feeling kind of overwhelmed. Like I just got back from vacation and I have a lot to do in the next 4 days to prepare for 4 keynotes coming up. And I was feeling overwhelmed, and I get this newsletter from James Clear, who's a best-selling author. And one of the things that he said in the newsletter today, or either today or a couple days ago, was the question is not, will today be a good day? Every day is a good day. The question is, how much good will you get out of today? And I was like, oh, I needed that reminder. I get to choose by how I approach the day, how much good I get out of it, you know? So I'm seeing some things in here. Tom, tour of the Zoo Animals Vet Hospital. So impressive. Brian, 3 new tech career coaching clients in the last week. Maureen, I'm glad the singing made you smile. Lisa, reconnecting and hugging dear friends in real life. Feels so good. Nathan, amazing vacation with my family. My daughter seeing the beach for the first time. Jujana, let's see, it was a Jawstone open air concert. How fun. Maria, welcome. Good morning. Glad you're here. Toby, a butterfly fluttering in the pollinator garden you planted at church. Tart cherries in your morning smoothie. Oh, Rich, I love cherries, especially Rainier ones. Carla, had a breakfast with a lady I used to work with on Saturday, and we talked for hours catching up. It was awesome. Anna, welcome. Watching how people in a small community come together during challenging times. Lenny, great cup of coffee today, and knowing we get to hear from you. Fantastic. That's awesome. Bright spot, going to London for a keynote and vacation next week. All right. Amazing. This is so great. This is so great. Oh, Natalie, your dad surprised you with an early birthday shopping spree a few days ago. Got breakfast, Hobby Lobby, solid day. And Anna fills a gratitude jar every day with a note of different colors as a visual reminder of how much there is to be thankful for. Diane, dolphin sighting on my run. Things I will never say living in Baltimore. That's awesome. So great. So great. Well, so excited to have all of you here today. This is going to be such a great conversation with someone that I met I want to say it's 5 years ago. Joseph, you'll correct me when you come on here if I'm missing that. I think it's been 5 years. We met through our friend Rex Miller, a mutual friend, with a community of people from across the United States. It was a group called the Guild, and we're coaches and trainers and speakers, and we met. And I remember the first conversation I had with the person I'm about to introduce. I think I was in tears within about 5 minutes, just from the honesty that was offered me and a moment of vulnerability. And so I know there's going to be so many aha moments today with this person, and I'm so excited for you to meet him. So without further ado, Joseph Myers is an entrepreneur, speaker, writer, and owner of josephrmyers.com, a consulting firm specializing in community and trust relationship development. With decades of experience, he has worked with leading organizations and businesses, helping them cultivate successful and trustworthy communities. He's the author of best-selling books, including The Search to Belong and Organic Community, and his most recent book just came out, and it's called Trust Me, Discovering Trust in a Culture of Distrust. It combines insights into the complex nature of trust and provides practical strategies to navigate its intricate web. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, please help me give a warm, unmuted welcome to Joseph Myers.
Thanks, Rachel. It's so good to be on here with you. Wow, it doesn't seem like it was 5 years ago we sat across the table from one another.
Yeah,
But
5.5 maybe. I don't know. Probably five and a
yeah,
half. Huh?
I'm sure it is. In some ways, it seems like 20,
I
and
know.
in other ways, it seems like yesterday, right?
It's a weird thing. Yeah, I remember. I think I was telling you this is before I left my job. I was still in my corporate job, and I think I was saying to you, I just feel so scattered. There's so many different things I'm interested in. I want to do, and everyone's telling me I have to like narrow in and have my niche and do my thing. I don't. Do you remember exactly what you said? I sort of forget. Like, I just know that I was like, wait, I can be many things, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you were so concerned because everybody was telling you to focus in on one thing in particular or two things and quit being so scattered around and I just said, you have the competencies to do the scattered thing. Go be you.
Mm,
And
yeah.
you don't have to focus in on one thing. I'm not sure I ever have in my life, and it's been halfway successful every once in a while. I hit one or two hits, so uh, yeah, that was a fun conversation.
Yeah. And I see you as somebody who's always been like a truth teller, somebody who will say the hard thing that needs to be said, but in a way that is for the good of another person.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think you're the perfect person to be talking about this conversation with trust. We're going to be talking about trusting ourselves. We're going to be talking about trusting other people. We're going to be talking about the difference between trust and distrust. But before we do that, I would love to hear from you. We always like to get to know, like at a personal level, the people that we're having conversations with, on this show. And I'm curious if you could think of a time in your life where you were muting some aspect of yourself and a journey that you went on. And no matter how roller coasterish that journey was or how linear it was, that you went to become unmuted. So any aspect of your life or work you want to share with us that fits that, go for it.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question for me because I'm, in the Gallup stuff, I'm a force of nature, and I'm an Enneagram 8 with a wing 7. There's not much muting that goes on when you're as forefront as my personality pushes me to be. But I do remember a particular story where I was really contemplating giving up writing. Uh, I hadn't written I'd done a lot of writing in my personal life and I'd done a lot of research and I was preparing to write things, but it just didn't feel like that anything was come bubbling up to the point that it would be released. I'm a person that I don't like to release anything until quote unquote it's ready. It doesn't matter to me that that's 20 years between my first book and this last one. It just hasn't been time. And so I just was really on this track of going, I'm just going to mute that part of my life. I don't need to be another best-selling author. I just don't need that. And maybe that's what's the cards for me. I'm a one-hit wonder kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I was on the phone with a person from United because I had to change one of my flights. And this person, she was very kind. She helped me out. She was across the US at the time. I actually think I might have been living in Canada at the time.
Mm.
And she said after helping me at the end of the conversation, she said, "Can I ask a personal question?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. What?" And she goes, "Well, are you Joseph R. Myers, the author?" And I said, "Yes, I am." So I just have to tell you, my son last year, it was last year or the year before, had been in the hospital for a very serious thing for 6 months. And I was, of course, setting with him for 6 months in a hospital room. And somebody gave me your book, Search to Belong, and it got me through. She said I read it over and over again. It just got me through this time with my son. And I got off the phone. I'm like, I can't mute that. um, it's just those times where someone reaches out and encourages you to, please don't mute whatever you're thinking in your own head, whatever you're not trusting about yourself. Quit it, stop it, as Bob Newhart would say, and let's get this show on the road.
That, like, how did you process that? I mean, like, that's the odds of, this is when you look at things that happen in the world and you're like, okay, there are these things that are like these little, there was a book I got one time a friend gave me called, the title of it's called God Winks, I think. And it's like these little things that let you know, hello, I see you. Like, this is your path. I mean, what was that like? All the people that could have answered the phone that day.
Yeah, and her bravery to step out and ask if this was me.
Yeah.
I it was a celebratory kind of. I hung up the phone and was like, yes, that's exactly what I needed. Thank you so much. I think that I ran up to my office and started writing right away. Like, I'm not going to let this wait. I'm going to really get this off and running. And the interesting thing, Rachel, about it too, the connection to Trust Me was, I started thinking about and researching the content for the book for Trust Me in the 80s. Now, I know that makes me really, really old. So way back in the 1900s, I started working on this book, and just had not been able to find the research necessary to undergird the foundation of what I was seeing about trust and distrust. And it literally had to be within days. It wasn't weeks that a new neuroscience study came out, and it gave me the permission, the foundation to actually build this book. And so all those things together just was like, oh, this is, I'm on the road again, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. It's a great, I mean, feeling. It's a great, I mean, to have a moment like that that's so clear that you're like, oh, okay, if I had any doubt, that pretty much just knocked that away, like I just want to welcome to Hunter has joined us, and Stefan has joined us, and Prince, welcome, welcome. But yeah, it's when you have those moments that are so clear, one, you have to be like paying attention.
Yeah.
Receptive to those things happening, and then willing to act on it, right? Because she could have said that, and then you could have said, that's nice.
Right.
But it was almost like that was like the spark that you needed to ignite the thing to do what you knew you had wanted to do. And it was like, hey, the time is now.
Yeah. And I still have to say that's 4 years ago.
Wow.
But it was the kind of seminal moment of me not shutting down and shutting down this book and the concepts in it, and still going forward after 40 years.
Yeah. That's amazing.
It's just craziness.
It is craziness. And yeah, it's a story of clarity and courage. Very, very true, Lisa. And I'm curious, Joseph, there's so much to say. I feel like we could talk for 7 hours or 8 hours or 5 days or 2 months or 5 years about the concept of trust. So I'm curious, what has surprised you most in what you've discovered about what leads to trust? And anything you can connect it to about how it's related to how we maybe mute ourselves in relationships, or mute ourselves within ourselves, like if we're not trusting ourselves. So anything you want to share that was interesting that you've learned?
Yeah. So even in that story that we just, talked through, the deep-seated distrust that I had started telling myself, the stories that came from the distrust that I had in myself, that I really wasn't an author. I just so happened to get lucky, one time a long time ago, and I needed to put that, to rest and do something else with my life. Those distrust stories, and then the ability, like you said, to take that moment where this lady gives me her gift. That's what is so intriguing about trust and distrust. So the neuroscience that finally emerged, what it helped me express is that the first thing is that distrust and trust are two separate concepts. They're not linked.
Are you there? Can you hear me? I think we froze for a second. Don't worry, everybody. We'll get it back. Hold tight. On the edge of our seat, we're like, distrust and trust are not the same. He's going to come back. If you have any questions while we're waiting for that, if you want to drop questions in, we'll give Joseph the opportunity to respond to them on the show today. So if you want to drop in the chat any questions that you have about any questions relating to trust, whether it's trusting yourself, whether it's trusting a loved one, whether it's trusting a member of your team, how to get team members to trust one another, whatever it is that you want to drop in there. If you can't trust Wi-Fi. Edge of my seat, love it. I appreciate the humor in this community. It's like, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? There's nothing else you can do. You can't like magically go to Montana and make that work. Good old network issues, the painful freeze. All of you are making me feel so supported here. He will be back. So feel free to drop in your questions in the chat about, let's see, one second. Any questions you have about trust? I think it's something, I don't know about you, but sometimes I find that, and I'll see what he has to say about this, that sometimes when I'm not trusting myself, I tend to like not take action. I tend to just sit and ruminate on something when I'm not trusting myself. But I find that the thing that helps me trust myself is when I take intentional action toward a specific goal. So for instance, I've wanted to write a book for a while now, and I finally hired a developmental editor to start doing that, and trusting he'll return. This is a comedy show, if anyone didn't know this. Don't worry, I have full faith that we'll get him back. But I noticed that when I take calculated action, like I actually hired her and I said, I really want to write this book now. And now I've got the draft of chapter 1 has been written. We've gone through it. We've made edits. I submitted the draft of chapter 2 last week. We're going to review it this Wednesday. So I'm like, I say I want to do a thing, right? When we say we want to do a thing, but we do nothing toward that, taking action toward it, then it's hard to trust ourselves. All right, Joseph, we're on the edge of our seats. The difference between trust and distrust. Tell us.
Sorry about that. Electricity and everything just went down. So, so the difference between trust and distrust is trust comes from the prefrontal cortex. It's processed in the front of your brain, in that executive part of your brain. Distrust is processed in the amygdala, which is that fight, flight, or freeze part of your brain. So essentially, the way I like to simplify it is we decide to trust and we feel distrust. And you can have a high level of trust and a high level of distrust at the exact same time. They can influence each other, but it's not equal amounts. The more I distrust, the less I trust. You can actually have both at the exact same time. And when we're talking about muting ourselves and trust, which I think has a core foundation in how you distrust and trust yourself. So when we distrust ourselves, it's coming from the prefrontal or from the amygdala saying, I don't feel safe with myself. And when we start trusting ourselves, it's a decision to allow us to basically, because the prefrontal cortex is interested in building relationship, whether it be relationship like puzzle pieces or people, it kind of doesn't distinguish that, but it's about building relationship. And its core thing is, I want to have a relationship with me when we're trusting ourselves.
So the interesting thing, it's so connected. See, even the little pause there on that little blip, I was like, all right, well, here's what I notice when I'm trusting myself. Like when I'm not trusting myself, I tend to get stuck in a state of rumination. When I am trusting myself, I go into a state of action. And I'm taking the intentional steps toward the thing that I want to do. And I'm proving to myself that I am trustworthy because I am taking action on the thing that I said is important to me. Does that align?
It aligns perfectly. So think of the amygdala has basically two personalities. It can act as a guard dog or a guide dog. And so it can be barking and biting and all those things that good guard dogs do. or it can actually be guiding us through risk.
Hmm.
So the thing that you said about when you're trusting yourself, what you do is take action. Trust takes risk and action takes risk. So in that riskiness, we begin to trust and make that decision that we're going to trust ourselves, that we're going to go out, we're going to take this leap, that we're going to take that risk, no matter what our guard dog might be barking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of times our self-talk is standing there rattling a fence, you know, agging on our barking guard dog to keep barking, keep barking, keep barking, because you know that's a actually it's a pretty comfortable place to be. But to move that guard dog to guide dog so that it allows us to, we don't want to get rid of our distrust of ourselves or anyone else. It takes distrust to actually trust.
Hmm.
So what you want to do is move that distrust into a guiding form. So for instance, there's things about, let's give a definition of trust and distrust for ourselves.
Sure.
Like Feldman in his little book, the Thin Book of Trust.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tweak it just a little bit for self-trust and self-distrust. So trusting yourself is choosing to risk making something that's important to you or a situation or whatever safe with you.
Hmm.
And distrust is believing what's important to you is not safe with you.
Hmm.
And so I know there's things that aren't safe with me. I have to have boundaries. I have to have, you know, and so, and I can walk right up to those boundaries and do all kinds of things. But I need my guard dog that when I'm about to step over the line, I need it to bark.
Mm-hmm.
So you also don't want to mute your guard dog.
Yeah.
But you want it to be guiding you in a very healthy way. You don't want it to be barking about things that you really should be doing, like writing a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
This lady calmed my guard dog down and said, wait a minute. You can do this. You're supposed to be doing this. Go and do it. It's going to take a while, but that's okay. Go do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. And it's interesting because it's bringing up for me something that came up like recently when I was doing my TED talk 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. People were asking me like, oh my gosh, are you so nervous? And I was like, and like initially, not until like the day before did I really start to realize like sort of like it has some gravity to it.
Right.
Because I'd prepared so thoroughly, but I said, and I was talking to a speaking coach I was working with, and something interesting he said, I said, you know, all the time people say the difference between, you know, you just tell yourself it's not really anxiety, it's excitement. And he's like, or it's not really nerves, it's excitement. He's like, well, sometimes it's nerves. Like, and what's wrong with it being nerves? Like, don't tell yourself it's something, it's not, don't lie to yourself. He said, so what I told myself was this adrenaline pumping through me is I can trust it because it's there to help me focus. And it's there when I get on that stage, it's helping me to be as focused and as accurate and as on point as possible. Like it is not there to sabotage me. So the story I told myself about the adrenaline rush and the nerves is that is intentionally there in a moment of high performance to help me get the job done.
Yes.
And that helps me to trust myself to say, this thing is not trying to throw me off or screw me over or blow this thing for me. It's there because it's trying to help me focus so that when I get on stage, I can deliver.
Exactly. And that's what we have to tell ourselves is how am I feeling unsafe? Mm-hmm. And why because that's all the amygdala is trying to do is keep you safe. Yeah. It's not concentrating on anything else. It's not focusing on anything else. It's just like, hey, I see something out there that might be destructive or harmful to you. And you have to have a conversation with that and go, you know what? That's not the case. In fact, the stuff that I'm feeling is actually natural and important in this situation. So I'm going to let it guide me so that I can decide to take the risk.
Yes. Yeah. Because if you're totally zenned out in that situation, right? If I'm totally zenned out,
yeah,
I can't be zenned out if I'm delivering a TED talk and I'm looking at a clock and I'm like, no, I need to be on.
Exactly.
You know, and
exactly.
Toby asked a question that's relevant. So there's a connection between trust and faith. Do you agree? curious about your interpretation of that question. And Toby, if you want to share more about that, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I definitely. So trust is it takes a leap of faith, you might say, or a trust leap. Those things are in common. You have to have faith um, in and of yourself, and to move that guard dog to guide dog. So what I call socializing your dog. You
Mm-hmm.
have to socialize it in a way that that takes faith. It takes anything that has risk takes faith. Now, if you're talking more about like the faith, like a Christianity or whatever faith, then I think there's a whole different thing that it connects to there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious if you want to, I'm just curious, I'm just make sure I didn't miss any other questions. And Toby, if you want to dig in more, feel free to elaborate on that, on your question. But I think continuing this is really helpful. In the areas, has there been any other areas in your life where you haven't trusted yourself aside from the writing thing, that you've gone on a journey to build greater trust within yourself?
Of course. I mean, um, anytime that there's been failure, like complete failure in my life, which there's been a lot. In fact, I was noticing I keep track of my failures. Now I call it my productive wrongs because my journals about failures is at some point this is going to come in really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It at some point what I just said or what I just did that really failed is going to be applicable someplace else, and it's actually going to, be a win.
Yeah.
So, but there are times that there's been just utter complete failure in my life, and I went through, um, as you know, and I just went through open heart surgery. And so, one of the interesting things leading up to that open heart surgery is you're taking account for your life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a possibility I won't come out of this. They're yanking your heart, they're shutting your lungs down, they're yanking your heart out of your chest, they're doing whatever they do within there, and there's machines keeping you alive, and then they kind of put it back and see if you can restart. And when you take an account that that's what they're going to do, your life meaning flashes before you.
Mm-hmm.
There are some devastating things that I have experienced, failures that I've experienced in my life, and all of a sudden those started taking over one day. Like I couldn't get it out of my head that I did this and I failed, and I did this and I failed, and oh look, now there's a string between them, and I'm really no good because I have all this crap in my life that I must be the biggest poser of all time, because really behind it all is this string of yucky failure
Mm-hmm.
and experience. I For about 2 days I was just like I could barely get out of bed, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what does my life really come to mean if that's really the reflection of my life? And of course, at some point, being the force of nature I am, I have to be a force of nature with myself
Mm-hmm.
and go get out of this damn bed and make it and get on with your life. You've had extreme successes, and so let's use those failures to do something productive.
Yeah, I love that one. I love what Natalie adds in here too. She said, fail for me means focus and I intentionally learn.
Mm,
Like,
love that.
so very, very relevant to the conversation, I think.
Yes.
How about in situations, I'm sure everyone that's with us today has had an experience where they've experienced distrust with somebody. So I think of two situations, like scenarios. One, there's sometimes these scenarios where you are in someone's presence and you can't explain rationally why, but there is something about that person that just makes you feel off in some way. I've had this happen before. I was at a meal with somebody years ago, and I was sitting up with my hands like this, and they reached across the table to like grab my wrist and said, "I'm so glad we're friends." And my immediate response as that was happening was to jerk my hand away. And I just couldn't stop thinking about that. Like,
Mhm.
what was that? You know, like what was going on? Why? And the message I interpreted that to mean was, I do not trust this person.
Mhm.
And I was like, but it was such a simple gesture. Why would I? And this happened like 5 years ago, and I was processing with a really good friend recently, and I said, well, if you did that to me, I wouldn't jerk back. And she's like, I wouldn't do that to you. I wouldn't put you in a situation of like feeling trapped or grabbed like that. I would never do that to you. So that's why you never feel that with me, because I would never do it in the first place. So I'm curious, when there's a situation like that where I think all of us have had a time where we're like, I don't know, this person gives you the creeps, or this person just, I don't feel like I can fully be myself with them, or I don't feel like I can let my guard down with them. What's going on in those situations?
Yeah. So again, it's one of the things that is such a um, bad advice about trusting people. If trust and distrust are on the same spectrum, the only reason or the only way I can trust you is to get rid of the distrust.
Hmm.
Now, that's really bad because of what you've just said.
Hmm.
We have to have this guarding amygdala response to things that we feel unsafe about. Now, it's good for us to always take a step back unless it's really physical harm and someone's going to kill us, which hardly ever happens to any of us.
Right.
But and there's psychological safety that you have to put your guard up against. And I realize there's extreme decisions that have to be made, and the amygdala is totally right, and you need to do what it's saying. 99% of the time, though, we have the wherewithal to step back and go, what about this is making me feel unsafe?
Hmm.
And whatever that is, whatever that distrust is, now, is that legitimate and I should pay attention to it? Or is it not legitimate and I need a better story about what's going on here?
Hmm.
Now, we all know that our brains actually keep log of things that we don't remember,
Yeah.
quote unquote. We can't
Hmm.
bring up. And it's also in our DNA, our grandparents' thoughts. And I mean, we know that
Hmm.
all of it, all of, like for my grandparents were very racist.
Hmm.
I know that I have to be aware that that's in my DNA. It's been baked in.
Hmm.
And so I constantly is over. I have to make sure that my guard dog isn't barking at something that was my grandparents' DNA.
Hmm. Yeah.
So there's things that we have to step back at and go, why did I feel that way? Why did I feel unsafe? And we can basically practice this in a way that we can do it very, very quickly. And either you can say that was an appropriate response in this case with this friend, and I only have the capacity then and to make the decision to trust them this much
Hmm. Hmm.
and not put a whole bunch of volume, because you can have trust and distrust at the same time.
Hmm.
So I don't need to build volume of trust with them, or I don't need to build context in which my trust with them is very weighty, but I can trust them with maybe lunch every once in a while.
Yeah. And not much more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do? I'm curious. What would you advise someone to do? I think we've all had situations where trust has been broken or betrayed in a
Mm,
relationship,
mm,
and it's deeply painful, especially depending on who the relationship is with, depending on what was done. What have you found to be, because this happens at work, this happens in our homes, it happens in our friendships. What have you found and what have you learned is effective in trying to restore or repair it? Or is there another decision that could be made too? So I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
curious. Yeah.
No, that's such an insightful question. So, as I researched this, my thought was that trust was kind of like this bank account that you could build trust with a person and keep putting trust in and trust in and trust in. And basically, if you break it every once in a while, you have so much trust in that bank account that they're going to keep trusting you.
Hmm.
The fact is that trust actually is more like a flywheel,
Hmm.
not a bank account. And it it demands or it needs momentum.
Hmm.
So how do I get that momentum? Well, it's, things in life are so paradoxical. So the trust flywheel requires three things. One is to mitigate distrust, meaning move guard dog to guide dog.
Hmm.
And then second stage is to engage trust, decide that I'm going to trust whatever amount that I'm going to trust it. And then third, in the place that we almost always stumble is you have to prepare that trust is going to be tested.
Hmm.
Trust is always going to be tested. Doesn't matter what the relationship is, doesn't matter how much volume of trust you have that you've done in the past with friend or foe, whatever you're doing, it's going to be tested. So you have to prepare for that reaction, number one.
Hmm.
You have to prepare that whatever happens, this is how I'm going to process mitigating distrust and engaging trust again.
Hmm.
So mitigating distrust is all about the things that get rid of risk.
Yeah.
Now, paradoxically, the thing about trust, to build trust, you need risk. So it's a constant taking risk away so that my guard dog won't, I'm not shaking that fence any longer,
Mm-hmm.
and my guard dog will go away or at least relieve itself to be a guide dog. And I can then take an appropriate, healthy risk to have a relationship, whatever that relationship is.
Hmm.
So if someone goes, for instance, let's just go into an extreme, an affair, there's a lot of barking and biting.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of fence, shaking from yourself and from others.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get all kinds of advice from your best friend that will just keep shaking that fence. And then there'll be friends that'll go, no, no, let's step away from the fence. There's just a lot of advice that goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
What you eventually have to do is let that guard dog rest and say, how can this amygdala, how can this response, how can this feeling of distrust guide me to make an appropriate decision of trust?
Hmm.
So, is it okay that I move into trusting them again after an affair? The answer is yes. It's the amount of trust you're going to give them,
Hmm.
it's the amount of risk that you're going to take on. We see this in abusive relationships all the time. They get rid of their guard dog, completely mute that guard dog, and they decide to fully trust over and over and over again because there's nothing barking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
totally gone. So it takes both trust and distrust to live a relationship with someone. Number one, it's always going to be tested.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's a devastating test, you need to have practiced going through that process over and over again with them so that you can make an appropriate, healthy decision to trust again in whatever way you want.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that come to mind for me when I think about this. And if anyone has any questions about trust, drop them in the chat and we will get to them. I think about this when we have a relationship with someone who's really close to us, maybe like a family member, right? I've had a situation over the past decade that's been really hard with a family member, and there's been a lot of pain and tears and a lot of trust shattered, and it's been really difficult. And so I've sort of make the choice to kind of like dip my toe in the water of it, of like, okay, if you're going to ask me to do this thing, like, that doesn't require a whole lot of me, but is me being showing support and love to you in the way that I feel capable of doing that right now, then like I'll say yes to that. But I'm not going to like try to be a savior, because I know if I do that, then I'm going to be taken advantage of, and I can't trust you to honor me showing up that way. So I need to trust myself enough to know how much I'm going to give you of me. I'm going to give you this much.
Perfect.
I would love to give you this much because that's how much I love you, but I cannot trust you with more than this much right now. So that's all we're going to get right now. And then that's an accordion that can change over time.
Yes.
It's not set.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly the process. For instance, so I have a sister that is a very difficult relationship, and specifically on asking for money,
Mm,
needing money. Okay.
mm,
And so, and she desperately does need money. It's just the way it is. And so I no longer will give her money straightforward.
mm,
I'll buy her gift certificates to get food.
mhm,
I'll pay for her own electricity.
mhm,
I even support a homeless shelter that she goes to, frequents a lot.
mhm. Yeah.
But I can't trust her with cash.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, if I give her cash, I should never trust myself again.
Mm.
It's the way I feel. Like, what
Yeah.
an idiot.
Mm.
Why am I not listening to that guard dog who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Why not take that to a real guide dog situation?
Mhm.
And you can love her and you can support her in all kinds of ways, but this one way, you really can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And knowing that is helpful, because if you do betray your own trust to yourself, you're like, no, you know what? I feel this thing really, really loudly telling me, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then I do it anyway. And then I get disappointed by the outcome I knew was going to happen. And then it
Right?
happens.
Right?
And then I think that further hurts our ability to trust ourselves, because we're like, you knew and
That's
you
right.
betrayed your own trust in yourself that you had and did the thing
Yeah.
that you knew was going to come back and bite you. And it did.
And it did.
And it did. So, and then I think having self-compassion in those moments is also helpful. I would imagine that self-compassion and trust, is there a link between those
Oh,
two
yeah.
things? I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, again, having compassion in any situation, whether for yourself or for others, is a risky proposition.
Mm. Hmm.
Takes a lot of risk to have compassion for somebody.
Yeah.
So, especially someone like me who has zero empathy, on my strengths, I think it's the last one. So, but you have to, anything that takes risk builds trust.
Mm. I love that. Anything. Tim's always capturing thought bombs in here in the so anything that builds trust takes risks, is that what you said?
Hmm.
Yeah. So Tim, we'll drop that in. I guess another thing related to, work and other people we have to trust are like people that we work with, right? Coworkers and bosses and people that we manage and lead. And I think it could be tricky. Like, trust could be tricky in the workplace, because there's a lot of things that people may or may not have control over that can affect them, a layoff or different things like that. So I'm curious if people are struggling in a relationship with somebody that they need to work with closely, and they're finding that trust is, I don't know, maybe a little absent. Are there some specific things that come to mind for you? Maybe things they can do internally and things they can do within that relationship to help strengthen that in some way?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of really helpful questions.
Okay.
One is, what about this situation or this person makes me feel unsafe?
Mm,
And get at the core of what that is.
mm,
What is it that I'm feeling? Not, hey, I feel unsafe for the company, or I feel unsafe for Susie over here because they no, what is it? Your distrust is all about you. It's not about anybody else. It's
mm,
about how you feel unsafe. So if you can get at the core of that, and by the way, our personalities have a little bit to do with that. Like, for
mm,
instance, I mentioned I'm an Enneagram 8. For those of you know, it's just force of nature really kind of describes me. Well, an Enneagram 9 is a peacemaker. They love calm. They don't like chaos. They want everybody to get along. I will instantly not trust them
mm,
because I love chaos. I think chaos is what makes the world go around. Um, I think conflict is good. And so someone who's all the time trying to mitigate all that, to me, is just really risky, and I will stay away from that person. Just realize, and I have to realize, they're not trying to tear me down. But that's my first response.
yeah.
They don't like what I'm doing. They think I'm an idiot.
Mm,
So it's realizing, what about my core beliefs in myself and the world, the way I look at the world, what about that are they attacking, or do I think they're attacking, and what's unsafe?
Mm.
So that's the number one question.
Mm.
Get to the safety thing. What about this makes me feel unsafe? Because once you are aware of that, now you can figure out, is this really a devastating, unsafe situation that I have to really protect myself?
Mhm.
Or is this a semi, kind of like what we were talking about our family members? Is this a semi unsafe situation? And therefore, I can only trust this amount. And then that leads me to the next question. And the next question is, be very specific about the risk you can take with that person.
Mm.
I can risk this with them. I
Mm.
know that for instance, I know that they'll always be on time with projects. I know that. And so I know I can take the risk to give them a project and they'll always be on time.
Mm.
Now, what I'm not sure about, what I feel unsafe about, is the quality of that project.
Mm.
So what can I do? I know that it'll be on time. So I can give them things that I need to be on time with, right?
Mhm.
Or I can work with them collaborative to help them, that they can help me be on time with stuff. And then I can help them with the quality. So I can take the risk to say, here's the three things I can help them in quality.
Mm.
I don't have to help them in time. I can trust that.
Mhm.
Is that helpful?
So it's like, what about them can I trust? It's like,
Yeah,
because it's sometimes it can be all consuming of like, I don't trust this person. I don't feel safe with them. Is that a universal statement, or is there a part of who they are or how they are that like actually works? Or
right.
maybe because you're so consumed with what isn't working that you're missing what is good.
That's exactly it. And again, it's what I call socializing your guard dog.
Hmm. Yeah.
You have to teach a guard dog what is appropriate to bark at and what's not appropriate.
Yeah. That can be hard because it's like sometimes from the time we're little, the guard dog is barking at, it's like ingrained in us, right? There's a thing that happened and that person is reminding us of that
Right.
person from 30 years earlier. Those two people never met each other. They had nothing to do with each other, but the same response is elicited.
Right. And I've always thought this was fascinating, they're reminding you of what your grandfather's DNA has put inside you.
Sure.
And it has nothing to do with one of your memories. It's one of your ancestor memories.
Yeah. There's a book. I think it's a Mark Woline. I think his name is. It
Mhm.
didn't start with me. It didn't start with you. Is that the name of the book?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fascinating book. It didn't start with you. It's just, I mean, mind blowing how this, well, exactly what you're saying. It gives all these examples of these things that happened that people had no experience in their own life, but it was something that had been like baked into their DNA. And then they were like,
Right.
oh, that's what that was. What the heck?
Exactly. And again, that's what's so critical about the first step being, what about this feels unsafe?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I so triggered by this thing? Because whatever it is, it's I'm feeling unsafe about it. So what is that? What's at the core of that?
Yeah.
Figuring that out is so important.
There's something to that. I think it's one of the things I talk about a lot when it comes to unmuting yourself is asking questions to get clarity.
Yeah.
Because in order to build any type of confidence or courage, you have to have clarity first. And when we ask ourselves questions and we're willing to sit with and answer, it can be a difficult question to say, what about this makes me feel unsafe? Oh gosh, I don't want to have to think about that. Because then I'm reminded of a thing, or I feel inadequate, or I feel like I shouldn't feel that thing and I'm judging myself and I just need to move on and get over it. Like that's what we want to do, just like charge through. But there's
Yeah.
real power in pausing and checking in. It's a checking in with yourself.
Yeah. And for instance, like with my sister, for years, what I thought I felt unsafe about was that she was taking advantage of me.
Hmm.
That's when I got really serious about asking the question, what I knew was, I think she's going to make me look like a fool.
Mm. Yeah,
That's what
that
I'm scared of.
that was the bigger concern.
That's a big concern.
Yeah, that was the bigger issue. Getting to the root of it. Um, I'm wondering. I know we only have like a few minutes left, like on our final 5 minutes. Is there anything else you'd want to share that surprised you, or for anybody who may be struggling with either trusting themselves or other people, anything that surprised you and what you've learned? I know there's a lot of like neuroscience and other research that informs a lot of what you share in your book. And we'll drop, Tim, if we want to drop Joseph's social links in the chat so people can follow him on social, that would be great. Anything else you'd want to share that you think would be kind of relevant to the conversation today that might be helpful to people?
I have 40 years of research in my head, and now I'm having to filter through all of that.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. You know, I don't know about surprise, but one of the helpful things, as you know, Rachel, my first instinct with research or whatever is, what about this could be wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What are they asking the right questions? Did they use the right? I'm constantly going, oh, that's really interesting, but what about it could be wrong? And which is, one of my productive wrong traits. And I'm also usually reading things mixed up because I have dyslexia. So a lot of times I'll read concepts and think that, oh, wow, that was really cool. And then I'll go back and reread it. And I'm like, that's not at all what they said. So, but one of the things that at first I hated about trust, one of the research things, and now I adore it, is Brené's Brown braving.
Oh.
Have you seen that? So
Yeah, the
her,
acronym.
yeah, her acronym of braving. So let me see if I can remember it. B is for boundaries. Did I respect my own boundaries? R is for am I reliable? A is for do I keep myself accountable, not others, but myself? Uh, do I have a good vault for V? That's safe and really a vault. Um, did I act with integrity? N is do I ask what I need? Am I really good at asking for what I'm needed? And then G is for am I
Non-judgment and generosity. That's what I heard.
generosity, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At first I really bristled against a lot of that, and I thought, you know what? Um, anyway, what I like about the braving acronym is it helps me with both distrust and trust. There's things that are action based that mitigate distrust and move me to a guide situation from guard to guide
Mm.
about braving. But there's also a lot of risk in there. And all those risky things that she's asked us to do or to consider build trust. So it does both. It helps with both sides of that flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
And then third, it gives me a really helpful tool to engage when when trust is tested.
Mm. Yeah, I
I
love
can
it.
go, okay, here, braving. Let me walk through this with myself. So it's a really good framework for preparation.
I love that. And I just dropped the link to it from her website too,
Oh, good,
just to
good.
have that, because I love her stuff, and I acronyms are memorable, right? And they're clear, and they help us, keep these things kind of in the front of our mind, and not like when we need to call on them, when we have a moment like that, we can remember kind of that sequence of questions that we can go through to ask
Yeah,
ourselves.
and I bristle against pithy stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that first reading it, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But our brain has to have frameworks.
Yeah.
It's constantly trying to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
And if we don't give it simple frameworks to use as tools, not as an end all, but as tools to get where we're going, it, that's the way our brain works. We might as well not fight it.
Yeah. As like I don't know, calling on words you said the whole time, guide, right? Like it's
Yeah,
frameworks are a guide.
that's right.
That maybe if it's a tried and true, it's been a tested, vetted framework. Maybe that helps us. Maybe we can trust it, and then we can move forward, and we're more likely to be successful. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out
Exactly.
there.
Exactly.
Oh well, is there anything else? Where can people find Trust Me? Where can they find the book, Joseph?
Amazon.
Okay.
So look, and you probably have to Google or put in the search my name also, because there's 1.5 million books, most of them romance related, that are called Trust Me. But if you put in Trust Me, Joseph Myers, you'll get to it.
All right. Awesome. I'm going to drop that. I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to drop that in so people can see it. There we go. And any last things you want to say? Everyone can connect with you on social. Any final words you want to share with us today?
Yeah, connect with me on social and or at josephrmyers.com, Myers. And I'd love to hear, as you know, I love to hear people's thoughts and
Yeah.
how they're finding that they're trusting and distrusting, and are they doing it differently now that they know their brain processes it differently? I don't know. It just was interesting to me, and so it became a book.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, Rebecca says thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you for being here, Rebecca. For everyone who's joined us today, thank you for spending time with us on your Monday. Hopefully, you got some really helpful insights about how to listen to but not be ruled by your guard dog, and how to better train and tame and socialize the guide dog to help you get in the right direction. So I just want to say, Natalie says thank you. Finn, welcome, and glad that you could be here today as well. So Joseph, I just want to say thank you for a great conversation today. It was wonderful to reconnect and to catch up. And I know that this conversation is going to be helpful to anyone who is either here for Team Live or Team Replay. And just thank you for writing this book, for trusting yourself enough to do that. And I know that anyone who reads it's going to benefit. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
Rachel.
yeah, everybody, I'll keep you posted on our next episode. Stay tuned. 2 weeks from now is my wedding anniversary. So I will not be doing a show on my anniversary because I will be honoring my marriage. But stay tuned. It'll likely be the 14th. So thank you again, everybody, and have a fantastic unmuted week. Bye.